Welcome back, everyone, to the No BS Real Estate Podcast, your listening how-to guide to the Australian real estate market. I'm here today with one of our partners, Tim Graham from Hotspotting. He's been a great, person to me in general, but also a great partner to Abodey, and I'm so excited to finally interview him. So this episode is all about talking about Tim and his services, not only at what he does at Hotspotting, but also what he does through his advocacy business for buyers agents. So Tim, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Joe. Pleasure to be here.
Amazing. So I like to get straight into these things because, we've got our listeners who are eger to hear about you. So We'll jump straight into the episode. And my first question to you is, more about your background and I guess your passions. How did you get into buyers advocacy?
It's an interesting one. I actually had a career in hospitality for about 12 years out of school, where I owned pubs and cafes and things like that. And then, after 12 years in hospitality, I heard about these amazing things called weekends. And they sounded unbelievable, and I wanted to try them. So we sold the pub, and then I basically back then, this is probably, I don't know if Seek was around back then, but I do recall when we had an offer on the pub, and I was reading the newspaper and the Herald Sun, looking through the classified for jobs, because that's what we used to do back then. And sure enough, I found an ad for what was called an in-home consultant for an investment company. I was like, well, that sounds interesting. And I at that stage, I owned a block of land, but that was the only piece of real estate I ever owned. And I didn't have any experience in finance or real estate, so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. But I applied for the job. I went and watched another consultant do a presentation in a customer's home, where they were talking about how to leverage equity in your home and buy investment properties and everything. And it was really interesting stuff. So I said, yeah, this is something I think I could do. So anyway, I moved down to Melbourne in 2011 and started working for a company called Reventon on St Kilda Road, which was property investment, mortgage broking, financial planning, accounting, and property management. So it was a good business to sort of get into, because I got to learn all facets of the industry. But my role to begin with was an in-home consultant, where really I didn't have to have a lot of expertise other than getting people to like me, which through hospitality I sort of managed to do reasonably easy. So I spent the next 6 months teaching people about what we did in the office, and my job was to book them in and speak to the experts. But after about 6 months, I went, well, that's not that much fun. I want to know what they know. So I went and did my mortgage broking diploma. And then ironically, I never actually wrote a loan, but I got a really good foundation of understanding around mortgages, and I realized there was way too much paperwork in that, and that's where I decided to move across into helping people buy real estate. So yeah, that's sort of how I ended up in it. But then after 5 years, I was a national sales manager there for 5 years at that business. And then another startup company here in Melbourne called Investorus, which is a global marketplace for real estate agents, mortgage brokers, and financial planners to access inventory to source for their clients. They were in a big stage of growth and were opening up offices all over the world. So I got an opportunity to work for them as their global sales director, and they shipped me off to, well, ironically, I was meant to go to Singapore for 2 weeks and then Miami in the US for 2 weeks. And it took me 3 years to come home. So we opened up offices all over the world. So I was lucky enough to do real estate in 18 different countries, which was pretty cool.
That's an unbelievable story. What a way to get into it, from hospitality shifting into, mortgage brokering and property, which is, I guess really unique in the sense of your offering, because you do have so much, in-depth knowledge about different markets. Not only that, but also, the financial side, which is so important when purchasing a property. And for a lot of listeners that don't know, often, buyers advocates, unless they have that financial qualification, they can't really give too much financial advice. So it's mainly about the property journey. So it gives you quite an edge, I would say, Tim.
Well, I think that's very true, Joe. But the other thing is that, it's quite often, even if you buy the right, a good piece of real estate, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can grow a portfolio. And the reason for that is a lot of the time it's in the numbers, not the property. So if you, over leverage and you, max out your borrowing capacity, even if that property, has leaps and bounds in growth, if you're still on interest only because you're focusing on paying off your owner occupier home, you probably can't go again because your debt level is still so high on the investment. So that property could, shoot through the roof with growth. But a lot of people just can't replicate the process of, buying one, two, three, four. So my understanding of finance has put me in good stead for this type of work. But interestingly, buyers advocacy is a really popular, industry now, and it's something that most people sort of know exists. But when I first started doing it sort of 13 years ago, it certainly didn't. And my it was, I suppose, my experience in the US where I went, you know what? Because in the US, for any listeners that don't know, on every transaction, you've got a broker. You've got a broker who works on behalf of the seller. You've got a broker who works on behalf of the purchaser. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you why would the vendor or the person selling the property have the expertise of a real estate agent to guide them through the process, and then not have somebody who's purchasing have the same thing? So, I do believe that the purchaser really needs to have somebody with the expertise to help them, negotiate, help them make sure they're not overpaying, help them ensure they've got the building in pest and all those types of things. And as I say, for me, with the finance background, I can sort of help people plan a property portfolio. So where I might be a little bit different to a lot of buyers agents, I really don't help owner occupiers, find their dream home. My total experience has always been in helping people on the investment front.
No, that's really good to know. And yeah, you said it so correctly. This is exactly why Abodey is doing what it's doing, bringing, buyers agents to the forefront in that profession, because in the US, everyone does have representation. So that's super important. It regulates the market and it makes everything, an even playing field, especially when it comes to negotiations. So totally hear you there. And this leads into...
It's a very expensive exercise if you get it wrong. We've got, real estate is not an easy thing to buy and sell. Unlike shares where there's nearly always another buyer, and you can sell it and liquidate quickly. With real estate, you've got really expensive transactional costs. So, you really don't want to be getting that wrong.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this kind of leads nicely into the next question I have for you. Like, what can clients expect from working with you? So can you outline the typical steps involved in the buying process with your services?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose it's probably worth noting that there's two businesses involved here. So my first business is hotspotting.com.au. So we're known as Australia's #1 independent real estate analyst. And in layman terms, what that means is we take big real estate data, but we combine that with demographic data, population trends, and major projects like infrastructure projects, and then we condense that into insights. So investors can come along and buy a report and know where are the best locations in Australia to invest. We also supply an enormous amount of buyers agents around the country with those same types of insights and reports. So that's where it really starts with me. Whenever I have a meeting with customers to begin with, is to sort of educate them. I take them through a process called selecting the right investment property, and it really educates customers on the pros and cons to all the different strategies. As a property investor, I'm about to buy, I've got so many choices. Do I buy a house? Do I buy a townhouse? Do I buy an apartment? Do I buy new? Do I buy old? And, there's a lot of people out there in the profession who say, you only ever buy new, or you only ever buy established, you never buy an apartment. And the truth be known, you can't make that assumption. Every single customer that you meet with is in a different stage of their life. They've got different portfolio assets already. And the real key to what I do is to understand what the customer's needs and goals are, and look at what they've already got. And that can come down to even portfolio planning with diversification into different states, making sure we're not paying too much land tax, all these types of things. So that's where it really starts, is really me educate the customer on our data, our insights, and then get them to understand the pros and cons to all the different asset types so that they can actually make an informed decision. And I often say to customers, my job isn't to sell you an investment property, it's to help you buy one. I'll educate you on the pros and cons, and you tell me what you'd like. And that seems to work well for me, because no one likes to be sold. We don't want to be told what to buy. It needs to be your decision, and you need to feel comfortable with it. So, quite often my customers are saying, well, Tim, where should we be buying? And I say, well, I'm going to show you a few different areas, and you tell me which one resonates with you.
No, that's excellent. And it's a really good, thorough process. I think you said it right when you get to know the customer, what their needs and goals are first, and then work from there. So it's
that's right.
super important to understand, the client needs, because it's going to drive the rest of the sale. It's going to guide how you approach the situation as well.
Yeah, of course.
And
then, so once we've searched for the property, we've negotiated the right deal, the next step is that we would, if they don't have the conveyancer licensed in the state they're purchasing in, we would refer them to, we work with a conveyancer who's licensed in pretty much all states. So we would help them with the conveyancing, would then organise your building and pest inspection, help you with your insurances, and then ultimately property management. So we're pretty much an end-to-end solution on that, and we do that all over Australia.
that's incredible. I think that is so valuable to have everything in one place.
Yeah.
I can definitely understand that. And I guess I would love to understand, can you share a memorable experience with a client where you went either above and beyond to help them find the right home, or maybe you negotiated a pretty tough deal and you managed to, change a few things?
Look, one that comes to mind, and this is actually many years ago, funnily enough, and I suppose the reason this story resonates with me now is because it actually, I got a testimonial out of them, but it took a couple of years before I actually received this testimonial and almost forgot about them, to be completely honest. The reason being, though, is that I didn't actually make $1 out of the transaction. So what happened? Wow. What happened was I met with a customer up in Wangaratta many years ago. And, I went into their home to meet them, and I more or less said, how can I help you? And they said, you probably can't. I said, okay, tell us why. And they were farmers. And if anyone knows anything about farmers, I'm a country boy myself. I know a little bit about farming. They basically, because they were running a primary producing farm, on paper, they weren't really making any money, which is not much fun when you're trying to go to a bank and ask for a loan. So, of course, they brought me out there and they said, somebody else that you'd work with recommended that we have a chat with you, but you probably can't help us. And I said, well, tell me a bit about the story. So they said, look, we really want to be buying the next door neighbour's farm because we're only on, 30 acres here and we really need a bit more to make this farm work. And I said, okay, and what's the problem? They said, well, we can't get a loan. I said, okay. And this is a good tip for anybody. It's not always about the purchase price. It's always about the terms. And the best way to find out about the terms, or to find the best way to win a deal, is to find out why the person next door is selling, or why is this listing up for sale. So I asked them that question. I said, why are the next door neighbours selling? Why are they selling? They said, yeah, they want to get off the land because they're quite old. And I said, okay. Do you know much more about them? Have they got other assets? What's more important to them? Is it the, upfront lump sum, or would they be open to maybe vendor financing it, where you pay them a fee and you pay it off over time? And they said, well, to be honest, they're a bit older, and I know they've already got a place in town, so maybe they'll move into that and it could work. So anyway, we sort of started to workshop, how much was it and how could we pay it off, etc. And from memory, these numbers I might be making up, but I recall it not being overly expensive. It might have been $500,000 or something that they wanted for this farm. And I said to him, well, why don't you say, well, I'm not going to pay you $500,000. What if I pay you $600,000? Would they be happy with that? I said, potentially. I said, will you be able to generate income through buying that farm? And they said, yeah. So what if we work out a deal that you pay that off over the next 10 years, but you're giving them more than they're asking for today? And they said, can you do that? I said, of course you can. I said, you need a solicitor to draw it up. But I said, it all starts with a conversation. So sure enough, it took a couple of years before I found out that that's exactly what they did. And the testimonial that I got is them saying, writing to me and say, Tim, I don't know if you recall us, but you saved us $1 million. And I said, why is that? And they said, well, if we had taken out a 30-year loan, and you think about it, a $500,000 loan, paid off over 30 years, they would have paid $1 million in interest. So I remember that one specifically. And the reason I do is because, a lot of people don't think that creatively when it comes to trying to help people find a way to win a deal. And so that one definitely stands out. And as I say, it's also a feel-good one because you don't have to make $1 out of every transaction.
That's a great story. Like, what a turn of events. Like you said, it's not about always making the money off the back of it, but the fact that you were able to help out this family that thought it wasn't going to be possible. They already
100%.
kind of had that defeated mindset when you went to their home and said, no, what can we do? And I think it brings up such an important point about terms, because oftentimes what a lot of buyers, and for listeners, tuning in today, don't realize is you can negotiate the terms. You don't have to
Absolutely.
accept necessarily what's on offer. But it also works the same way for vendors. They don't have to accept what you're offering. And this is what the art of negotiation is. So the reason why buyers advocates help so much is because, like Tim explained, they've got the experience and the know-how and the knowledge to be able to work with the parameters of what everyone wants and work out the best deal that's going to be mutually beneficial. And ideally, it wins you the property that you want. So I love that story. I think that's a great one, especially 2 years later, getting a testimonial. Like, you must have really helped him out.
I think it was actually years later. It could have been. I mean, I got the testimonial when I got back from Miami. Yeah, I'd have to have been over 5 years later that I got it. So,
Oh, wow. It says a lot about your service. So that's great. And I just wanted to share one final thought from you. What advice have you got to home buyers who are currently, they're either about to set out on the home buying journey, or maybe they're right in the middle of it and they're having some difficulty winning a property? What's your advice to them?
Look, it's a tough one. I mean, I'd probably give different advice to the home searcher than the investor. But I think, for both of those markets, don't fall into the trap of FOMO. I need to buy something. I need to buy something and rush in and buying something just for the sake of getting in. Obviously, there's a lot of there's a lot of data and there's a lot of research and a lot of resources now to make sure that you can sort of educate yourself to make the right buying decisions. But alternatively, obviously, this is a bit self-fulfilling, but there are expertise like buyer's agents that can help you. And what I often say to people is, you may know, a little bit about the real estate laws in the state that you live in, but especially if you're buying interstate, you really need to know that you've got somebody acting on your behalf that understands the laws in each state when it comes to real estate, because when they do, they know that they've got the ability to use that to their advantage. So as an example, I'll use this as a really brief example, but if you go and bid onto something in Queensland, the line of questioning I always start with when I speak to an agent, do you have any offers on the property? And quite often they'll be, they obviously have to be transparent, but quite often they'll say no. When I place my offer, they have to give me a form to tell me if there are multiple offers in the transaction. So if I ever place an offer and they don't give me one, I say, can I assume that I am the only bidder at this stage? So what that means is I can place a really low bid. And if they don't supply me with that, I'm only going to edge up slightly if they don't accept my initial bid. Whereas if there's multiple offers in the transaction, I know I've got a bit more competition in market. So they're just like one example of why you wouldn't have to do that in other states. But there's a lot of insights that you can get, and the negotiation power that a buyer's agent may have that can help you in that situation could save you tens of thousands of dollars.
100%. I think that's great advice. I think, Tim, this interview has been awesome because, like I said, I know you on a personal level, and we've partnered together, but I think hearing your perspective, your stories, and how you came into this whole crazy world of buyers advocacy and property, down to the final thoughts there, I think it's fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and sharing your knowledge with everyone today. For anyone that's looking to use Tim's services, he is available obviously in this app. If you're listening to this episode while you're in the app and deciding whether you want to use Tim or not, please have a look at his profile, book in a consultation. It's for obligation free to have a chat and see what services are available to you and how we can help you out. But hey, Tim, thank you so much for being here once again.
Good on you, Jade. Pleasure. Thanks.
All right. Have a great day. Thanks everyone for tuning in. See you later.